What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 70 of the Noizze podcast, brought to you by Noizze.co.uk and sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. I am your host, / your boy, Principe, and I'm joined, as ever, by my very good friend and Mr. Cynical himself, Samuel Lewis. One day before we break up. Dude, how are you?
I am absolutely crawling to the finish line.
Oh, mate.
But apart from that, I'm absolutely fine. It's once again wonderful to see your face likewise and do this podcast again.
And what an episode it is going to be, Sam. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of today's episode, let's tell everyone who we are. We are a rock and metal podcast sponsored by Stereo Brain Records. We are available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. Me and Sam both run that account. On the last episode of the Noizze Podcast, which was last Tuesday, we ran through the news and had reviews of Mice of Men's new EP, Bloom, and Noctool's Wretched Abyss. Plus, we had an interview with the very band we are discussing in this podcast, bassist. We spoke to Joe Principe of Rise Against. Me and you both agree, Sam, the best interview we've done as a duo, definitely.
I would say so. In terms of just the enthusiasm, the content, everything. He was such a gentleman.
Yeah, awesome. And on this episode, as you can see by the title, this is our review of the band's upcoming album, Nowhere Generation. This was originally slated to be on the episode that included the interview with Joe Principe. However, this album had an embargo on it, but we couldn't release thoughts on it until the 31st of May. So that is why this extra episode is happening. We are going to go through the record in full detail for you. And let's start with that now, Sam. Nowhere Generation is Rise Against's 9th album, their first in 4 years. It's out on June the 4th via Spine Farm Records. Whenever we do a review, Sam, and even more so, a big review, I always like to set the scene, you know me. I feel like, and maybe this is something that me and you need to try and not do in future, because I feel like we did the same with Alter Bridge. Do we overlook Rise Against, Sam, when we're talking about big bands of the 21st century? Because they are one of them, and I don't think we ever mentioned them.
Yeah, I think we do overlook them. I was actually thinking about this. I've got a hot take on Rise Against a little bit later. But really, we don't talk about them in terms of the great rock bands of the 21st century really as much as we should do. We should be talking about them as much as we talk about Green Day and Disturbed and Avenged Sevenfold. At least in that generation of big bands that have continued their popularity over the last 21 years. And Evanescence are another band that we reviewed this year that have been around since the early 2000s that we talk about. I think that are much more in the cultural zeitgeist than Rise Against. And I think this band have aged better than all of them.
Oh my goodness, yes.
We absolutely we need to talk about it.
I mean, again, me and you, we're open for criticism. They're a band that really we shouldn't be overlooking. They're a multi-gold platinum selling band, always high up on the bill of festivals, if not headlining. Massively well respected by their peers. They're a real solid evidence of contemporary punk rock. Obviously, the kings in that field are Green Day, but I think this was going to be, you mentioned the hot take there. I think I'm about to say what your hot take was going to be. Let's see. I would say, with the exception of American Idiot, Rise Against have had a much, much better last 20 years than Green Day. If both of these bands would have turned up in 2002, I think Rise Against would be head and shoulders above Green Day in terms of popularity. Because Green Day had, in that 80, well, nearly 19 years, how old does that make us feel? In that 19-year span, Green Day have had one outstanding, like, life-changingly great record, and the rest have been, one was decent, 21st Century Breakdown, and the other 5 have been complete duds. Whereas Rise Against, really, generally, there's an album that me and you will talk about, well, I will talk about with you that I didn't like. But generally, Rise Against have been a solid 7/8 out of 10 for their entire run. And that is a difficult thing to do, especially when really we're working off of 2 blueprints. Because when Rise Against first burst through, they were like a punk rock / hardcore band. And in the late 2000s, they just became this big, almost like climactic punk rock band. So they've been working off 2 blueprints and they've been consistently good for 20 years. That's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I have a very similar view to yourself, and my view, to continue from your take on that, was that after reviewing the Foo Fighters record, Rise Against
Ah,
have now become the most consistent rock band of the 21st century.
wow. Okay, that is a take.
They overtook Foo Fighters just because this is very good, and the last Foo Fighters album is tin.
Oh my God,
And
Foo
that,
Fighters are.
and other than before that happened, you could have made a claim that Foo Fighters had not released a bad album. And I agree that the album you're going to talk about with Rise Against, you didn't like, is great, but I would say that is better than the last Foo Fighters album.
Oh
which,
yeah.
when you add the fact that Nowhere Generation is very good, which we'll talk about in a moment, has made Rise Against the most consistent rock band of the 21st century. Is there anyone I'm missing out if you say Biffy Clyro or Falling Out?
Well, I mean, I would say Biffy Clyro.
Yeah, but all right, since 2000, like, you know, like for bands that have released an album in 2000, 2021, where's the contemporary?
Well, I mean, off the top of my head, you're
Of course.
my immediate answer is Biffy Clyro, and I would.
When was Biffy's first album?
Oh mate, I want to say 2000. You know what? I'm going to say 2001, but I did this on the last podcast. I'm going to do it now. Let me check. I want to say
Let's do it.
2001.
See, I thought they were a mid-2000s band, which does throw a spanner in my workings. That I've
Well,
just
no,
sort
but
of...
you weren't to know that. To be fair, were you? I mean, you're not going to go out there searching for Biffy facts, are you? Black and Sky by Biffy Clyro came out in 2002. So that was Biffy's debut, and then Biffy spent 2002 to 2010 being like this really weird, strange, very very unusual noise rock band, and that's where a lot of Biffy's, for the people that love Biffy Clyro, they tend to love Biffy Clyro. Not every fan, but a fair few of the ones I've spoken to, at least, love Biffy Clyro because they were this really weird, obtuse, crazy noise rock band in the mid 2000s to late 2000s, and then they became like this rock band that could all of a sudden sell at arenas because they had this ability to write insanely catchy choruses.
So I would argue then, just for the sake of my own narrative, that Biffy Clyro weren't a contemporary of Rise Against until much later in their career. So I can, for the purposes of my narrative, not to dismiss Biffy Clyro for any other sake than just for this, I can say that the contemporaries of Rise Against are bands that have been modern-ish rock bands from 2000 onwards, which it's a small list, albeit, but it does include Foo Fighters, Green Day, you could chuck Sum 41, Good Charlotte, Evanescence, Linkin Park, loads of bands that came out during that period of time that have become very big. And I am saying that Rise Against are now officially the most consistent one. They're every other band that I just named release album tomorrow. I ask you to rate your excitement, and it's like moderate at best.
Yeah,
like if I was like, oh, Simple Plan, new album,
I'd crease immediately.
Review it. Good Charlotte, you'd be like, pass. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'd be like, oh, Placebo, new record. It just wouldn't happen, would it? So in a modern rock sense, I do think that they've taken that mantle.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I think that I'm not really familiar with them, but I think Queens of the Stone Age fans would probably throw their hat in there. I haven't listened. You know what? I'm not a Queens of the Stone Age fan. I'm not going to pretend to be. Maybe Muse as well. Again, objectively, I'm not really sure.
Stereophonics.
But in terms of Rise Against Field, let's be honest, Muse aren't in Rise Against Field. They're just not. So, dude, that is a point that I would absolutely take on board. And off the top of my head, with the exception of Biffy Clyro, I really can't think of many bands that would back that away. I mean, even like Red Hot Chili Peppers in the last decade, I'd take Rise Against. I'd take Rise Against stuff over Red Hot Chili Peppers in the last decade.
So if Chili Peppers release an album tomorrow, are you enthused?
I'd be skeptical. The only reason why I'd be excited for the next Chili Peppers album is because John Frusciante has rejoined the band.
That's true. I'd be excited about that.
But other than if John Frusciante still wasn't in the band, I don't mean any disrespect to Chili Peppers without John Frusciante, but Chili Peppers' last 2 or 3 albums have been fine, but without John Frusciante, I find them a different proposition in terms of my excitement of something new. So, dude, I'm absolutely going to take that point on board. what I've done actually, as soon as you mentioned they're the most consistent band and the band that you could, and I mentioned Festival Billings, I have pulled up, Sam, their set list from Download 2018, just because I thought, right, let me see what a set list from Rise Against looks like, just to kind of compound our point here of how important, how great of a modern rock band that they are. Okay, so The Violence, Satellite, Survive, I Don't Want to Be Here Anymore, House on Fire, Ready to Fall, Help Is on the Way, Welcome to the Breakdown, Give It All, Blood Red, White and Blue, Re-Education, Saviour, Make It Stop, Like the Angel, Prayer of the Refugee. Dude, that's a great 45 minutes. That's a great... I mean, there's a couple of songs on there from Wolves, which I'm going to get into my thoughts on that album in a minute. But other than that, dude, that's a great 45 minutes. That's a cracking time.
It really is. It really is. I mean, if you're a festival owner, like Andy Coppin, and you need to fill 40 minutes, you need to fill 35 minutes on a second stage, mate. It's about as much of a lock as just a sound performance as you're going to get. That's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Do you know I was saying about Skindred? Where I was like, Skindred are the perfect festival band, and Crossfire for the perfect festival band, because their best songs run. There's like 6 or 7 great songs. They run for 40 minutes. Everyone's buzzing, sound. Listen to, and we made that point about listening to Crossfire on an album, and that's a problem. However, that's not the case with Rise Against. What I'm saying is, they are just that archetypal 45-minute festival booking. They're perfect for it.
They're all, Crossfire for bands like that are all starter bands, aren't they? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You wouldn't have Wings for your meal.
No.
Great opener. You know what I mean? That's that sort of thing. 30, 40 minutes. That's all you need.
Now, I was concerned for this album, Sam, when we first received it and it dropped in. I thought, right, I really respect Rise Against. I've got a lot of time for them. But Sam, you were with me when I was reviewing Wolves. You were literally sat next to me as I was typing up my review.
Yes.
Because you'd received it as well through your channels of Noizze. And we both said, dude, how boring is this? And I was worried that Rise Against would fall into where Green Day have been for the last decade, where it's just basically completely barren of new good ideas. Now, Rise Against did a great album in 2011, Endgame. Really, really good. But by the time it got to Wolves, I just thought, wow, the wheels have really, really fell off here. And I find this record terribly boring. And we were just both basically saying, how can a punk rock band in this time period, now it's 2017, but even then there was loads of horrible things happening. I was like, how could a punk rock band in this time period sound so boring? Sam, do you remember what the day I'm talking about when we sat and we were reviewing it together?
I do. Do you remember that it immediately followed drinking?
Yeah.
Do you remember that part of our life?
Yeah.
I do. And yeah, I remember saying, just think, why does it never happen? Where's this going? Like, why does this never have a third gear? Like, where's like, and we were saying, you know, like again, 2017, this should be the time of a punk bonds band. When we were like, the next Green Day album's going to be wicked. Now Trump's in charge.
Yeah.
What happened to that? Where's the Trump album, Billy Joe? What the fuck? But anyway, it's a separate conversation for a different podcast. We spent 95% of this podcast not talking about Rise Against. But yeah, and it was the sound of what it was at the time, which was all right, band past its peak, and you sort of some bands you just slap that label on, and that's it. They're there. Like there's a few like this. You know, when we reviewed Megadeth's later album in like 2016, you were like, they're an old band now. This is boring. Yeah. I'm out. It's like this is show me Rust in Peace or don't talk to me. And that bands get to that point, and Rise Against it felt, and punk bands there's a limited timeline really. It feels like it got to that, which is why hopefully you agree with me that it's an absolute pleasure that we are where we are.
Oh mate, this record's great and I love it. And just one moment of not talking about Rise Against for a second, we were talking about great, you know, big huge punk bands, dude. Compare Rise Against The Offspring. I would take Rise Against every living, breathing moment of the week. In fact, I would like you to record yourself listening to the new Offspring album for 40 minutes. It's called Let the Bad Times Roll. And Sam, it's abysmal. It's like awful, hilariously bad. It's terrible. So compare Rise Against to this. Sorry, compare Let the Bad Times Roll to this and Rise Against the Streets Ahead. Dude, Nowhere Generation is like really, really great. And Rise Against had absolutely no right to record an album of this quality 21 years into their career.
If this album dropped in 2005, it'd be,
Wow, yeah.
or if I turned around to you and said, oh, this is Rise Against third album, isn't it really good? I don't think they've peaked here. Like, it's a great album.
Yeah.
And it'd be utterly believable. And what that means is that this is brimming with vitality, life, and energy, that I think has probably come from the extended time I spent in the studio, because the writing touring dichotomy, the 2-year swing at some point, that that you've squeezed all you can out of the fruit. Do you know what I mean? Like every ounce of songwriting is just taken and just whipped in this flurry of just, you're no longer writing songs that you feel good about. You're just writing them to meet a deadline, or writing to put an album, to fill an album, to get on tour. And it's never your best work. It's just the work that meets the deadline because it has to go out. And it stops becoming songs that are written by you and just songs that resemble what you used to sound like. And that's where bands really start to struggle, I think, when they're just churning stuff out for the sake of it. And you worry about bands burning out. Whereas they've had 4 years on this, and they've clearly had lots of time to hone, to work. And we talked to Joe Principe on the podcast. He describes it as an incredibly organic process where they all come together. But having that additional time with the producer they had there, who'd worked with Jay-Z and all that sort of stuff, and all the extra quality they had, and the time to really hone stuff, has paid some dividends here, because I think that has given them maybe if this album had 2 years, it'd be another 6.5, 7 out of 10 Rise Against album. But I think now they've had time to hone, improve, maybe add a couple of songs, take a few album tracks out. The extra 12 months, they've written a song that would have been a single on the next album. Because of the extra time, it's made this album better as a whole. It's taken it to a different sort of level, because I think, just there's no basis to my theories, as there rarely are, that the numbers and 7 album tracks would have been fine in a normal world, because that's their opening track, that the title track. It's a good thank you Rise Against. You can go on tour again. You've done that and move on. But I think that having the additional songwriting time has meant that this is littered from start to finish with brilliantly written, concise punk rock songs. The size of which Rise Against have always been, had a way with choruses and a way with songwriting. But when they're all packed together like this, it is astounding. You reach the final song on the album, and you're like, this is extraordinary that every song is melodious and poppy and has a memorable, massive chorus and isn't irritating, and like, do you know what I mean? Like it's crazy how like just immediately relatable everything is. I don't know how they've managed to write like 11 to 12 really anthemic rock songs, when usually the concept of an anthemic rock song is usually boring by the 4th time you hear it.
Yeah, because it's so derivative.
Album.
Yeah,
precisely. And as well, this is another thing. Me and you have listened to lots and lots and lots of music, of which this is a big part of. Big rock songs as kind of things that we've listened to more often than not. And how this is the same blueprint, because it is. This is something I've not heard before, and he's still interested and engaging. Is extraordinary to me. I really is an impressive piece of work that I think, as a hard rock, punk rock album, it's as close to like flawless. I mean, I'll say it's the greatest punk rock album out there, but I can sit here for what it is and what it's supposed to be and who it's meant to appeal to and who it's meant to be written for, and the feeling and mood that it's supposed to capture. I can't really see a flaw. Like it is perfect for that job. Okay, and I think that is for what it absolutely is. I think this is just absurdly fantastic. There isn't a bad song on this.
I think that as my mom comes in with a cup of tea, I think that like the thing with Wolves that bothered me more than anything else, from what I remember, is that it didn't seem to say anything. Like, I don't remember like listening to Wolves and being like and it being really caught by anything it was trying to get across. And even though Joe Principe was talking about how the band were driving past the same Donald Trump billboard on the way to the recording studio for every session. I mean, I might go back and listen to Wolves and see if I can pick up anything new that's like they're attempting to get across to me at this point, and see if there's something that I missed 4 years ago. But I remember listening to it back then and thinking, this isn't saying anything. This album's the complete opposite. This album, its mission statement is made abundantly clear. Literally, 30 seconds in, you mentioned numbers. This fiery, punchy, open riff. It's exactly what you need coming out of the gates of a Rise Against record. Tim McElrath sounds the best he has since 2011's Endgame, in my opinion. There's that lyric. They have the power. We have the numbers. You know, the message and the kind of the output that this album is trying to put across is made clear from 2 minutes in. It's an absolute anti-capitalism blast. This album is, and it's that message runs true throughout. It doesn't get overdone. They mix it up in certain different ways. Most of the time, the punch lands in the same area of your face, as you would expect with a Rise Against album. But it doesn't. It doesn't run the concept into the ground, like you said. How they've managed to write here, like 12 really uplifting, high octane rock songs, and not made me and you feel out after track 7. It is really, really quite an accomplishment, dude. When Sudden Urge starts, I really, really got caught on to the idea of this isn't just an album that's going to try and stick its flagpole in clean punk rock. There's a real grit to the lead riff on Sudden Urge. And there's a bridge that breaks back into the clean chorus, the lyric, light up the whole damn sky like it's the 4th of July. This attack on American obsessive nationalism. This album is like legitimately like interesting to listen to, not just lyrically, but musically as well. And for a band like Rise Against, which we have said, this is Rise Against executing the blueprint that they've been doing for the last 15 years to achieve that. That really is something that speaks to the quality of them and this record.
Completely agreed. Completely agreed. I love the refrain on his chorus, like the 4th of July way lets his vocal hang.
Yeah.
The way that he sort of that cadence sort of kicks back up, and he sort of has that little bit of personality that's outside of his sort of typical songwriting skill and vocal style. I think there's like 5 or 6 massive choruses here, and as well, you can see it with Rise Against walking past campaign posters. If they never wrote a song again, they could make careers out of writing mantras and slogans and posters, because broken generation is another one.
Broken Dreams.
Where Broken Dreams, thank you. The Broken Dreams generation, and all talking about the factories and the clocks and all that sort of stuff, and it's just so vivid and really, really, once again, wonderfully relatable, and strikes to the heart of the American dream and the crushing weight of capitalism, which is a very relatable topic internationally, not just locally for their audience as well. I just find myself incredibly won over by this. Now, I like Rise Against a lot, and I like them more really than most bands, alternative punk bands. Like, I like them more than Green Day. I like them more than Sum 41. So when I hear a good Rise Against song, it resonates with me a little bit more than a good song by the bands that I've just mentioned, because I just like their style of songwriting. I've always liked the drum beat, the driving sort of riffs and stuff. It's really worked for me. So when I hear songs like Broken Dreams, when I hear songs like Sounds Like and Monarch, that are these powerful, dark-ish, riffy songs, I'm like in. Some of this riff work he's really, really impressive. Like really, really, really impressive. There's a riff on Sounds Like, it's just terrific, absolutely terrific. That sort of descending sort of lead passage, simple drum beat again, like but it works perfectly for the driving, intense thing that I want to come across. And I want to shout out Forfeit, because it's the acoustic number, and I think it's terrific. I think it's fantastic. I think that it's massive, and it's immediately sing-alongable, if that's even an adjective that I can use.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of there's a Fall Out Boy song that came out. Oh, it's in B flat, so maybe like Phoenix, or not Rise Like a Phoenix. That's a different song. It's the one where he's like, just admit it, I never mattered, and it's an acoustic song.
Oh, mate, you've done it to me now, are you?
Da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da, da. Anyway,
We are like young volcanoes.
yeah, there we go. Young
Yeah, yeah,
Volcanoes.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
has that kind of vibe because it's got the acoustic and it's got the low timpani drums underneath. But it's not Fall Out Boy, so it doesn't make me want to shove my fingers down my throat. So that's positive. And instead, when it gets to the anthemic part, it's it's just terrific. It's driving and it's passionate and it's pushing. And I don't think that he's a strange vocalist because I think he's brilliant. But I think he's brilliant because he has one type of melodic
Yeah,
style and
yeah,
he's fantastic at it, and it's driving and it's passionate. Like, and Forfeit's a good example of that. Because the chorus is like 3 notes, and it's just these long, powerful notes, and he's able to just really find the perfect little pop melody in between all of his little phrases and stuff, and it keeps it going, it keeps it driving, and they never, there's no fat on this record. They just, play for what absolutely needs to be there, and I think it is really, really terrific. I'm really very, very, very impressed by this because from start to finish, I was trying to pick out like individual highlights, but I'd just be listing all of them to be honest. But like the Numbers and Sudden Urge for me at the the opening 2 tracks are fantastic. I love Broken Dreams and Forfeit and Monarch in the middle. I really like the opening riff of Sounds Like, and I love the last two songs, Middle of a Dream. Well, less so actually. In Rules of Play, I like the concluding number there. I think that, and that's 6 songs. Like, off an 11-song album, they're like, yeah, they're fantastic. They'll go like on a 5-star place for me, and I'm gonna be bumping those alongside Rise Against songs that I love. I think there's a chance that you talked about the set list. There's a few songs off Wolves, like, and then that's sort of like, you're sort of not as enthusiastic about those. But I really think the Numbers is as good a Rise Against song that they've written
yeah.
since Satellite.
Numbers go
And
straight in that set list.
and it's absolutely a brilliant song. I also think that Sudden Urge and Monarch could be there as well, and they wouldn't feel out of place next to Give It All or Save You or something like that, because they've got that sort of vibe of driving intensity and immediate relatability about it. And I'm so happy for this band. I'm so happy for this band because you're right that we don't talk about them enough. And every time I hear them, I'm like, oh yeah, I love this band. I really like this style of music, and I like this version of punk rock. And also, this is a reminder that this can be done well.
Yeah.
This can be that, and by an older band as well. There is a template here. There is an intensity, and there is a way to be able to do it. Because I mean, I use this analogy all the time. But if Green Day wrote half an album like this, you would be ecstatic.
I would, yeah.
And I would feel absolutely the same, because a lot of those bands haven't written a few songs as good as this for several years, and that's not just a Green Day thing. That's a wider thing it's a wider net that I'm casting there for that. I think this is really, really phenomenal. Like, lower half of my top 10 album of the year type consideration.
The title track on this album is the big single release from the record, and you can see why. It's positioned and written as the album's big, like, epic. And I think it's the best example of Rise Against attempting to write the big universal rock song since they did Savior. It's got this really monolithic chorus line, simple chord progressions, as is Rise Against. That is Rise Against, simple chord progressions, but so effective. My favourite song on the album now is Talking to Ourselves. The way Tim McIlrath like crawls across that chorus, I never wanted to disturb the peace, but I feels like no one's listening. Are we talking to ourselves? For a start, that lyric's awesome, and secondly, the way his vocals just creep across that and the way it's performed, so infectious. And I think it was when I hit, because Talking to Ourselves, it comes number 4 on the album. And I remember the first time I listened to this album, I was on the train to and then walking through Telford. And Talking to Ourselves came on the train, and I knew once it hit that, I was like, right, okay, this is an album that's like really great, that they've got no right being able to do at this point in their career. This is brilliant. And I think that Rise Against have always been good at that infectious sing along of, if I said to you, name a Rise Against song, or stopped a random person in the street that someone told me they liked alternative music, I reckon there's a decent chance they'd know Prayer of the Refugee. That song is like kind of universal. Mostly because of its stint on Guitar Hero. That's how I first came across Rise Against, because of Guitar Hero. But there's something to the way the chorus presents itself on Talking to Ourselves. It's like insanely capturing. And that song just, as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is one of the best songs they've done in years. And this album is a really, really great album. Dude, Sound Like has got a mini breakdown. Did you see that coming?
It has.
It's got
No,
a
I
mini
did
breakdown
not.
on it. I was like, what is this?
Man, it was like, this is brilliant. I was really impressed. And that's another thing. They've renewed the intensity. They've injected aggression into some of their music here. It was really, really, really impressive.
You were talking as well about Monarch. Just after the No Longer Will I Be a Prisoner to Empty Effing Words, a solo comes in. And this record is like chocked full, jammed with these huge setup lyrics for huge moments. You made a really good point. If Rise Against decided to dissolve tomorrow, they could just walk around writing. They could just be a work for a marketing company, writing billboard advertisements.
1000%.
They are great. They are still great at doing that. And this album is yet more proof. I see, and I think this is it, right? This is where the real proof of the pudding comes in. Whether a long time band have done a great album is where the album tracks don't feel like 6 out of 10s, because Middle of a Dream is an album track, but it's got a real gallop to its bridge into the chorus and a real chest pumping rhythm, and the lead riff gets like a kind of a millisecond of isolation, then middle eight, which really changes it up. So that's even though it's an album track, it's not a song that I would be like, yeah, 6 out of 10, we'll move on. Forfeit, I'm not as into it as you, but I think it's a perfectly sound, inoffensive acoustic number, and Tim McElrath sounds great because, like you said, he is great. He is one of the most reliable vocalists that we've got in alternative music, easily. I would say, we were talking about Miles Kennedy, Sam, a couple of weeks ago. I don't think Tim is that far behind him. I'd still have Miles Kennedy, but I don't think the distance is great. I think it's quite small.
Oh, I don't know, man. I think Miles Kennedy can do much more. I think he's got a greater range. I think if we're having it, I think if we can frame the conversation as like who's better at their individual craft, and then you can say that
that's
Tim
where I was going.
McElrath is like, he's as good a pop punk vocalist, pop rock vocalist as Miles Kennedy's like a rock vocalist. And that's a good conversation I can get with that. But like if like you were saying to Tim McElrath, can you do and then like do all the the octave upwards and stuff? I think but Miles Kennedy would lap him, to be honest. And
sorry, I was framing it. I was framing it as in their given field.
Right, yeah. In that circumstance, I'm with you. I'm with you. I think Tim is terrific. He might be the best. Might be one of the best voices in alternative rock period, mightn't he?
Yeah.
And the more I think about it, you might know a little bit more about it than me. You might be able to refer to sort of younger bands that are up and coming, but to have a voice that consistent. He has sounded the same since 2000.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens. I don't know how you do 21 years of touring, and it just doesn't. It doesn't have that sort of impact on your throat. And I don't know what he's doing. He's clearly looking after himself, and whatever that's working out for him, and that's phenomenal. Because you hear these horror stories of vocalists that just lose their voice and go through all these trials and tribulations. And I'm glad that hasn't taken place. But he's the star of this band. Right, he's the centerpiece, and there's some terrific riffs and some fantastic bass lines, and the drums are always terrific for what they're supposed to be. But he's the center stage. It's his lyrics and his songs and his message, and it kind of rises and falls with his songwriting. And I really do think that they've knocked it out the park.
dude, this is a special record, isn't it? This is like a really special record.
I really think that it is. I do think it has a great chance to be on an album of the year list because again, I mean, how do you compare an alternative rock album to a metal album, a deathcore album? You can't necessarily do that apples for apples. You can't. But what you can do is say, is that a better album within its genre? This album is within it, and you can do it that way. And I'll be honest, this is as good an alternative rock album than Cannibal Corpse's was a death metal album. And we were raving about that.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good one. That's a good one.
For what it does within its genre. And as well, again, it's an appropriate comparison because it's like, is this band done? Can this band do this? You know, longevity. And you know what I mean? It's like the kings of the blueprint have come back and proven why that they can do it sort of better than anybody else. It's you know what I mean? It's like an aging athlete still being better than everybody else. And this is sort of what it feels like. So that's what I would say for me, and that's the way that I would, you know, sort of put it up. And in that circumstance, I don't think there are many albums this year that have come out that are better in its genre than Rise Against are in its.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, wow.
I know I've put that on you again.
No, okay. Yeah, I think that. I mean, that's a great point. The Cannibal Corpse comparison, obviously not musically, but in terms of, in terms of, this is a punk rock album. That's a great punk rock album. That was a great death metal album. How great an album in their genre is this? I think those two could easily throw fists at each other.
Absolutely.
This is a great record.
A question for you, because I haven't heard the album. That thrash metal album you said that was like, this is the best thrash metal album of the year, without a shadow of a doubt.
I mean, Kilgrig by Enforced. That album's ridiculous. It's insane. That album is.
Is that a better thrash metal album than this is a punk rock album?
Oh, mate.
Have I asked the question?
Yeah, mate. That Enforced album's ridiculous. Is that
a 10 out of 10 thrash metal album? Like, that would be, you could say that this is as good as Exodus album.
No, it's you know, I don't think Kilgrid's South of Heaven, let alone Rain in Blood. But it's okay. But it's the best. It's by far the best thrash metal album since Power Trip's last album, Nightmare Logic, by a mile.
And this Rise Against album is an American Idiot.
No,
but it's in that probably in that level below, right? Top of very good.
Yeah,
not all-time great, but absolutely like an 8.5 out of 10 sort of record. And that's and again, 20 years down the road, 20 years later,
ridiculous.
What number album are we in now? Like 9th, 10th?
9.
Yeah, 9th. Band. You say the bands don't have the right. I mean, then they do. It's just they rarely exercise it, don't they? They're just they're not this. They're never this. They're never this good. I mean, Death Magnetic was Metallica's 10th record.
Yeah.
You know, 9th, I think. I think Hardwire was their 10th. Sorry, yeah, Death Magnetic was their 9th. That wasn't as good as this is for within its genre again.
No.
So, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you.
Man, big up Rise Against, man. How awesome's this? I love being able to prove myself wrong. Because you know me, dude. I come on this podcast and I said loads of times, do they have to do another album? Do they have to? I honestly think after Wolves, my thoughts would have been, do they have to do another album? Because I can happily listen to Endgame for the rest of my life.
Pew's walking around CDs putting sell-by dates on album covers.
Yeah, but man, I've been proved wrong. Great, keep prove me wrong, please. Although we both know that there'll be plenty of albums still this year that prove me right on that idea. But this one's proved me wrong. Great, I've got no problem admitting it. If I was worried about Rise Against, I had no reason to. This is Nowhere Generation is a really, really great album. As we speak, if you made me choose 10 now, I think this would be in it. Where exactly I'd put it, I don't know. But I think this would definitely be in it. A really, really wonderful surprise how great this album is.
I think I would agree with you. And as well, I think they told We've Got to Go.
Oh, mate,
I think this would be, because I went when I was like 15 and it wasn't really the same sort of, well, maybe 17. wasn't the same sort of joyous experience that I think me and you would have. Like, I think this would be a tremendous hour and
Great
20
time.
minutes of my
Great
of
time.
my life. I think they'd just be awesome. So yeah, that is the biggest recommendation because I could give, because it's like you didn't expect it to be good and you're wonderfully surprised. I expect it to be good, but not to be sucked back into the degree that I'd want to go see them actively, and that has absolutely happened. Um, their guitarist we spoke to last week, and he's wicked. This whole Rise Against experience has been so like heartwarming and endearing. This is terrific. Like it really, really is.
Dude, we are going to leave it there for our review of Rise Against Nowhere Generation. If you are listening to this, the album is out on June the 4th via Spine Farm Records. Me and Sam are going to be back next Tuesday. We are going to be talking about the new Hacktivist album, as well as the new album Go Ahead and Die, which is Max Cavalera and Igor Cavalera, his son's death metal band. So that's going to be particularly interesting. I've also got an interview with Twitch streamer Elliot Lever coming up on that episode as well. Thank you so much for listening. If you are still here, follow us on Twitter at Noizze Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is absolutely the best way to support us. We are going to be back next Tuesday. Thank you so much for listening. We love you. Bye.